Hello everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Dark Souls 2 Weekly. I'm Ryan Teljanik.
And I'm Lorenzo Valoria.
And today we're going to talk about starting classes in the game and their potential build options. Now,
there's 8 of them so far. They're sort of reminiscent of some of the old Dark Souls.
Yeah, a lot of them are carryover from the last game.
But there's some new ones too, so it's kind of interesting. So.
And now, the thing about classes is they can be extremely important, especially if you are pre-planning your build. Now, anybody that's done a lot of PvP in Dark Souls, you're gonna, after you've kind of gotten used to the game and you know what weapons and armor are available, and you're gonna plan out your build. You'll probably roll a fresh new character, and then follow your build layout to the letter. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the options that we'll have for each of these starting classes. If you're only just going to play through the game once, and especially now that there is an option to respec in Dark Souls 2, I think it's an incredibly difficult item, or perhaps a very expensive item to obtain, but I know that it does exist. And I'm not sure if it's something you can use over and over, or just perhaps once.
And that'll just save you some time if you could experiment a little bit and then just get it right into what your build to be.
Yeah, so the first class that we're going to talk about is the Warrior. This is basically a very basic but still well-rounded class.
Yeah, so he's like your sword and shield kind of guy, but he could also use like the special weapons because his stats are built around the strength and dexterity. So you could use like the special. I saw one weapon is like a two-bladed like Darth Maul kind of saber thing. And so you could use like special weapons like that because it's got those high stats.
Yeah. So anything in the game that scales very well with both strength and dexterity, he's going to be a very well-rounded pick. And this is probably, I haven't decided if this is the character I'm going to roll, or if I'm going to go with the next class we're going to talk about, just the Knight.
Yeah, the Knight. So the Knight is he's also kind of a hand-to-hand one weapon, sword, shield, maybe two-handed weapon kind of guy, but he also has faith and he has healing powers, and he could use that too.
So if you played the beta at all, you probably saw that there was an option of the Temple Knight, and I think this is kind of where that's headed. The Knight starts with a lot of health. He's got really good. He's got decent faith, as Lorenzo mentions. And he's just very well-rounded at survivability, and I think you'll probably see a lot of people choosing this class if they're going to go into tankier builds. Now, that's kind of how I played in Dark Souls. Again, I didn't ever get really into PvP, and I'm not sure how viable like a super tank-based build is there. But it helped out a lot for me during boss encounters, at least, having a lot of health at my disposal, a good shield, and it sounds like with the faith ability specifically, he can use a lot of the miracles to perhaps enhance his strength, or at the very least heal later on. So that'll be really useful as well.
So this will be the guy that you put on, strap on all your armor, get the big shields, get the big weapons, and then you can heal yourself.
Slow moving, slow rolling.
You can just turtle everything, just tank all the big bosses. So there you go, the Knight.
So then next up, we have the Bandit.
Yeah, so this is your bow and arrow guy. So he's got real high dexterity at first, and he's the kind of guy that you want to roll dodge a lot. You're not blocking attacks. You're keeping them at a distance.
Alternatively, you'll equip a katana and just be rolling around backstabbing people. These kinds of classes, dex builds are very fun, but also very obnoxious. And they're also kind of high risk, high reward because, especially if you're putting a lot of points. Now in Dark Souls 2, resistances have been wrapped into also your agility stat, into one stat called adaptation. And so this is also going to play a pretty big role in your dex-based build because, as we mentioned, you're going to be rolling around a lot. You're going to want to get high poise to be able to withstand, to be able to avoid getting stunned while you're trying to dodge around. And this will be really obnoxious. A lot of people have fun with the dex builds, but also, there are also a ton of people that love to rage against playing them because they're just so annoying, although just constantly somersaulting around.
And then the other dex build is the Swordsman, which was previously the Dual Swordsman. So this guy, he's got 2 swords.
Finally you can dual wield. It's going to be awesome, I hope.
No way to block, right? So
well, he the other thing too is he starts with super low health. Like I think his starting health stat is like 4, which is way lower. His endurance starts at like 4, so that's way lower than any of the other classes. Very high risk reward early on. And now one of his weapons that he starts off with, however, is an upgraded scimitar.
Yeah,
so that's going to give him a little bit, at least, of an edge.
Yeah, so he's got better weapons than everybody else in terms of the starting classes, which makes sense because he could take less damage, but the high risk, high reward thing is he could kill all the bad guys quicker.
And also, as we mentioned, he's kind of similar to the Bandit in that dexterity will probably play a really big role in his build. I think also so will adaptation because, again, the rolling is going to be super important, especially when he's not using a shield to block. But I think also strength is a little bit more important to this class than it is in the Bandit build. So
yeah, this one's definitely one of the classes that I'm definitely interested in trying out, just because in Dark Souls the two-handed option wasn't really viable. Just because I needed my shield.
Yeah, and so it'll be really cool to finally be able to dual wield. Now, obviously, a lot of these classes kind of have I like that there are a lot of archetypes that are kind of broken into two very similar but different types, and again, that kind of carryovers into the cleric, and also its counterpart, the sorcerer.
Right.
Now, these are very similar to how they were in Dark Souls. The cleric, you know you're going to expect to be have high faith stat, so you can cast a lot of miracles, and also it has a decent amount of strength. I think this is actually probably a really good pick for newcomers who haven't played at all, because the ability to heal, yes, you start with an Estus Flask and like 10 life gems, but the ability to heal is going to be super, super valuable.
Yeah, and this is the kind of class, like if you want to do a lot of co-op, you'd probably want to be a cleric, because you could go around healing your companions and stuff. So, and then there's the sorcerer, which is the other side of it, the intelligence build, that there's more intelligence in there, so they could use the all their crazy soul arrow spells. And
yeah, he starts off with soul arrow. No, so I have a lot of people say that this is also a really good starting class, but I don't know. Like, I kind of feel like maybe the tankier builds that help you really quickly learn the basics of like circle strafing and some of the Soul series more traditional tactics. I feel like those are often the better way to go. Yes, soul arrow is a nice ranged ability that does a lot of damage, but I also wonder like if that kind of hinders people's ability to learn how to deal with up-close encounters early on.
Yeah, if you're going to use a magic user, you definitely want to be used to the game. This is advanced. You have to be able to manage your spells all the time, and you have to manage that distance, and you have to know how the enemies move and the environment, and there's just a lot of things to worry about with casters. So
yeah, I mean, some people will totally disagree, and that's fine, but I think for particularly, at least for me, it was a much harder experience, not at all what I was kind of accustomed to, having come into Dark Souls from Demon Souls.
Right.
And so, yeah, I don't know, if range is something you really want to give a shot, that's probably not a bad option.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about our last two classes.
Yeah.
The Explorer sounds very interesting to me. He's kind of a jack of all trades.
Yeah, he has limited ability like stacks, so he's just like all around.
Yeah.
He doesn't really start off with any kind of special weapons. He does have a lot of extra items like special bombs and other things like that. So he's kind of a tricky kind of character to wrap your head around.
Well, like the limited amount I've seen about the Explorer, it seems as though like a lot of his early damage kind of is dependent on consumable items. That concerns me a little. I wonder how well he scales into the game once he's out of fire bombs and the sword. So I'll be really curious to see how that character kind of plays out, but it is certainly a good way to play around with some of the items you'll have access to.
To me personally, it's a little counterintuitive because I try to hoard everything in Dark Souls, and just kind of tossing all my crap away.
I know, I do the same
is a little
thing.
different, yeah.
And then finally we have, of course, the classic Deprived.
Yeah.
Starts at Soul level 1, absolutely zero equipment.
Yeah, he's just completely naked, but he could punch things now, which can be upgraded.
Yeah, the fist
now.
damage, I guess, in Dark Souls 2 is actually much more viable than it had been before.
Right.
And so I'm kind of curious to see how much damage that can ultimately lead to. But this is the class that people, after they've had some time with the game and once everybody knows everything about the available weapons and equipment, a lot of people are going to be rolling Deprived characters to build like their exact perfect soul build list.
Exactly.
So, once you're really looking to get into PvP, unless any of the other classes play in perfectly to what you're after, I think the Deprived is probably what you're going to roll, and then just start building them up exactly how you want.
Right. And that was our quick overview of all of the starter classes for Dark Souls 2. But this week we wanna know what you guys are gonna roll. What are you guys gonna try out first? What are you excited to try out? So let us know what classes you want to try.
And if even if there are some of your favorite builds that you had from Dark Souls, are you planning on carrying any of those over?
Yeah.
So definitely let us know in the comments below. And if you like the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and check us out at gamesradar.com. And then we'll check you guys out next week.
See ya.